As I think most of you are already aware, last week at Trailhead DX, Salesforce launched the open beta of the Salesforce DX tooling technology. I'm really excited about Salesforce DX. I think it's going to be transformational for development on this platform. At the beginning of the pilot, I started to integrate Salesforce DX into Illuminated Cloud. And in that first phase of integrations, I primarily took the notion of a scratch org and folded it in as a connection so that you could use all the features of Illuminated Cloud against it. One thing to point out is that was still using the internal tooling from Illuminated Cloud for deploying metadata, retrieving metadata, all those other operations. With the move to beta, I've started to enhance that feature set with the goal that by the time that Salesforce DX is GA, it's an incredibly full-featured, robust integration between the IDE and the Salesforce DX tooling. So I'd like to show the first phase of enhancements there on the beta, the open beta. You can see here that this project is a DX project. You can see SFDX project.json that defines the directory structure. If we take a look at the actions that are available within this project, you'll notice that at the top here, the deployment and retrieval options are quite different. If you were in a traditional project, and in fact I'll show that in a moment, you would see deploy all metadata, deploy modified metadata, retrieve, refresh, delete, things like that. And here you just see push and pull. The Salesforce DX CLI is pretty much taking care of two primary operations. Take the things that are in my local file system and push them to the server to bring the server up to date efficiently. And take any declarative changes that have happened in the server and pull them down into the local file system with the ultimate goal of checking those into a version control system as the single source of truth. And you'll notice that the key bindings here are some of the familiar key bindings. It can only show one at a time, but actually I've taken all of the deploy-oriented key bindings from a traditional project and converged them on push, and taken all of the retrieve, refresh-oriented key bindings and converged those on pull. And that's important because as you flow back and forth between the two styles of projects, traditional and Salesforce DX, you won't have to relearn keys. If you're familiar with using a particular key to initiate a deployment, it'll work for a push here and vice versa. So let's take a look at how this is going to work. I will go ahead and warn that with it being the beginning of the month, I think there's some sandbox refreshes happening, things like that. So deployment times have not been wonderful. We'll see how they hold up during the demo. So I'm going to make a local change, and I'm just going to press Control S, and down at the bottom you can see that it says that it's pushing the changed contents of this project to the scratch org with this alias. And when that completes, we'll get a summary in the messages window that will show something analogous to what you see on the command line when you actually run this force source push command. That'll show whatever has been transferred, or if there are issues, things like conflicts, which we'll look at in just a moment, what those issues were. Similar will happen with pull, which we'll do in just a moment. One thing I want to point out real quick while this is pushing, and it's not representative of these times, I'm doing this demo on Windows. Even when the servers are running extremely efficiently, there's about a 1 to 2 second lag on any commands that you run through Windows, not just from the IDE, from the command line as well, relative to Mac or Linux. And I've reported this to Salesforce already. The DX implementation team is already aware of this, and they have a lead on it, so hopefully we'll see a resolution on that in the fairly near future. So that completed in quite a large amount of time. Again, the servers are not being incredibly responsive this morning, but I wanted to get a demo out. So you can see that the class that I changed was pushed. And so if I do another push, the state tracking and dirty tracking of the CLI should take into account the fact that I've made no local changes, and it should, in a fairly quick period of time, come up and say that there are no changes to be pushed to the server. Yeah, so all files are up to date. So let's now turn this around and go to the server and first let's refresh this, and we should see that that local change comment header is pushed over into this file, and it was. And so let's make a server change, and I'm going to go ahead and save that, and let's take an object file and let's make a change to it. Go ahead and change the description. And to make this interesting, let's go back over to the IDE, and let's say local change 2 here, and we'll make a change to the same object file. And so what we're going to do is we're going to force introduce some conflicts. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start a pull operation. And it doesn't really matter whether you do a push or a pull. If there are conflicts, basically if there are changes to metadata locally, and there are changes to the same metadata on the server or vice versa, that's a conflict. And the thing about the conflict detection here that is different from conflict detection in traditional projects is that in traditional projects, you're trying to coordinate work among multiple people logging into the same org, say a shared sandbox org. One of the key tenets of Salesforce DX is that a developer works against a Scratch org and doesn't collaborate with anybody else. It's basically just an extension of his integrated development environment, or her integrated development environment. And so really what you're trying to do is you're trying to prevent yourself from having conflicts. So if you make a declarative change to shopping list, the custom object in the org, and then you come and just make a typo change in the XML file locally, you wouldn't want to lose one of those two changes, and it would warn you about that. So in this case, it's saying, do I want to retry with the force option, which would take the server copy and it would overwrite the local copy. I will go ahead and say no on that, and I will show that when I try to do a deploy, let's say that I want the local copy to win. When I try to deploy, it will detect the exact same change, and I'll go ahead and say I do want it to retry, and it will go ahead and overwrite the server copy with the local copy, and we'll take a look at that. So it's saying those same conflicts, retry with the force option, and now you can see that it is force pushing the metadata. Just a flag you can provide to the command line to say ignore conflicts and just go ahead and commit the changes I've asked you to commit. You can also see down here that there were 3 failures in that last deployment because of those conflicts, and if we go look at the message window, you would see those conflicts on the exact files. Now you can see that they went through successfully, and we can see that everything's good. And so one other thing I want to show here on push is I did build in support for static resource bundles, and so we'll go ahead and convert this to a resource bundle. And now down here we have that as a resource bundle. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to gauge.js, and we can see it, and we'll say modified yet again, and when I hit Control S, it'll happen very quickly, but at the bottom, in fact, it happened so quickly you probably couldn't see it, but it reconstituted the original resource file before it did the push. So it did that seamlessly. And similarly, if you do a pull and a resource is pulled down that's managed locally as a bundle, it'll prompt you to merge the bundle into your local exploded bundle file, or replace it, basically re-extract it, or cancel the operation, make sure that you don't do anything destructive. So, so full support for static resource bundles on pull and push. Now, if we flip over real quick to the same project, but as a traditional project, it's just the same metadata, but going against a DE org, and I show the context menu. This is the exact same build. In fact, it's the exact same running instance, but you can see that all the familiar operations are here. So it automatically detects whether you're in a DX project or a traditional project, and will adjust accordingly and either use the internal tooling or use the DX tooling. And similarly, if we go and look at running SOQL queries, or Anonymous Apex or the log viewer, one thing that you can see is that it shows both sets of connections. That's because it's obviously not unheard of that you might be sitting in working in one of your DX projects and you want to go run a query against your sandbox or something like that. And this allows you to do that. So I can run against this traditional org and I can run this query, or I can run the same query against, say, this org, and you can see that it ran as well. So it gives you some flexibility to use the developer productivity tools at the bottom of the dock, and use those against any connection that you have configured. And one other thing I want to show, flipping back over to the DX window, is that when you go into the subscription manager, there is no notion of managing a subscription for DX. The whole idea is that what you have in your file system, what you pulled out from version control, that is your subscription. That is your set of metadata that you want to work with. You want to take all of that and you want to put it into a Scratch org so that you can develop, or into a test Scratch org so that you can do integration testing or whatever it happens to be. And if you make any changes in your development Scratch org declaratively, you want to pull those back down to the file system. They become a part of your working subscription. You want to check those in. So there's no explicit management of a subscription here. You still have subscription management in a traditional project, but when you're working with a DX project, it's kind of working within the philosophy of DX, which is that everything in the file system, everything that came from version control, is part of your working set. So that's what I wanted to show in terms of the demo. That's what's going to be available with the build that I'm uploading today. I'll continue to iterate on that. Obviously, this is a pre-release build. If you see problems, let me know. I'll certainly take care of them, both with the Salesforce DX integration, or if I've introduced regressions with traditional tooling in this refactoring, because by the time that I release this, I want everything to be rock solid, of course. A couple of other qualifications. There are some bugs that I've reported to Salesforce around this. They include there's no conflict detection that I've been able to find so far on Lightning. So if you make a change in Developer Console and you make a change in Illuminated Cloud, to the same, say, .cmp file, you're not going to be prompted about a collision there. Additionally, and I haven't shown this yet, but I'll go ahead and show it, is if I introduce an error in a couple of files, and we'll go ahead and just do this kind of artificially, and save, errors show up exactly as they normally do. You'll get them in the problems view. They'll be kind of highlighted using annotations with the red squiggly underscore in the IDE. But one of the things I want to point out is with Salesforce DX, there's now metadata decomposition. So, for example, your object files are now broken down into the object, its fields, its list views, validation roles, whatever it happens to be, and underneath, what's happening is these are being reconstituted to be sent over to the server. So error messages, if you had an error inside this dot field, right now the errors are reported based on the recomposed file being the dot object file. And so while it will link to the object file, the line number will not line up. So you'll have to look at the reported error message and figure out which of the decomposed metadata actually contains that error. Again, we're seeing kind of a slow running server here. So in just a moment when this finishes, we'll be able to see the problems view. So what do I want to do in the future while that's finishing up? Well, over the next few iterations, I want to add the ability to create a new project in the new project wizard that will be a Salesforce DX project, and I'll lay down that SFDX project.json, the directory structure accordingly, things like that. I want to add the ability to manage scratch orgs, to create new connections as scratch orgs, to delete them if you want, things like that. I want to add the ability to bidirectionally convert metadata back and forth between the two formats, the metadata API format that we're all accustomed to and the new Salesforce DX format. And I want to add the ability to have run configurations, things that represent the different entry points. So it could be an Apex REST service, a Visualforce page, a Lightning app. You can add that as a run configuration, and when you run that, it will spin up a new scratch org as a test scratch org. It will populate that with your metadata, and then it will actually go to that entry point. If it's an Apex REST service, it will just go execute it by URI. If it's markup, it will go ahead and open it in the browser so that you can work with it, but you're not doing that in the context of the scratch org that represents an extension of your development environment. I think it'll just be a better workflow. And additionally, I want to monitor expiration on scratch orgs and automatically from the IDE renew them, meaning that if they've been expired, I'll just create a new one with the same alias and fold it in as the same connection name and allow you to push your metadata into it. So a lot of things that are effectively going to make it transparent that you're using Salesforce DX beneath this, and some of the I wouldn't call them idiosyncrasies, but behaviors that come with Salesforce DX, things like the ephemeral short duration nature of scratch orgs and the fact that the development scratch org is not intended to be used for actual interactive testing and such. So open to any feedback you guys have as you play with it. Like I said, report bugs, let me know about things that would help with your workflow, things like that, and I will definitely prioritize those. Hope you find it useful, and thank you very much.